Okay, hello, good day everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Merged Worlds, the Dungeons and Dragons story stream. Episode 105. Boy, we're getting up there. I appreciate everyone who's been listening to this story over the last few years and keeps coming back for a little bit more. I really enjoy sharing it. Last episode, we were back in Serenity, dealing with a very large beholder that was plaguing the lands north of Serenity near the city of Kenderhome. Kender village, or a small town that are allies of Serenity, friends of Queen Mercy and such. And they went up there to help with that. And at the very end of that, found out that the vault, as it is known, which is was a large, I guess you'd say, collection. They had discovered it very early much earlier in the Mergeworlds story, while trying to find a way in and around Oromon. They'd gone through this tunnel, which led to this giant vault, if you will, that had inside of it different types of creatures and monsters and things held in stasis. As they were going through, finding this, man, I got a little thing in my mouth, they learned that the merge itself had caused whatever was keeping them in stasis sealed to slowly crack and wear over time. And we learned just recently that Mercy and the mages of Serenity have been keeping the door that leads to that on this side of Serenity locked and magically barred. They go basically every year and renew the wards and such that keeps that protected. With the appearance of this large monstrosity beholder, something akin to what Mercy and her friends had seen in the vault, they sent a group to check on the status of the vault, only to find out that the doors of the vault had been blown off their hinges, which means anything that was still trapped inside the vault had the ability to escape. More of a concern, the doors were destroyed from the outside in, which means someone or something broke the vault open from the outside. And upon looking inside, the delegation, the group they sent, learned that the vault is now completely empty. Now, that's not to say that everything escaped into the lands north of Serenity. The vault has two exits, one to Serenity, around Serenity, and one into Oromon itself, which is why they used it as a pass-through. So whether or not everything went out the other end, may have already gone into the other end before anything this had happened. For the vault doors were open, it may have been empty inside. They don't know, because they have no way of checking the Oromon side or what its status was. So that was a big concern after dealing with the Beholder. And so now Serenity has to worry about what other things may be in the area lurking to be a danger towards it and its people. Tonight's story, we're going to be stepping back away from Serenity and going back to join the group of Artis, Maeve, Petal, Ran, and Kip. Before Serenity, I believe the last story we really were in were these guys again. I know we've been away from Seraph and them for a while, but there are reasons for that. We're going to get back to them again, I promise. But we are back with the artist group at tonight's episode. So we're going to be starting with where they are. And at the time of where this begins, it's just a couple of weeks since they had left Broda and his allies, the Minotaur community, that they had assisted them getting back all of their loot, and Quintius, the magical scepter that was also an intelligent magic artifact that has become friends with them, especially Artis, as Artis is the only one that can see or speak to the visual manifestation of the soul that's inside of it, that helped create it very, very long time ago. So we're going to be stepping in with them. So this story is going to just be a complete step away from the Broda stuff. So none of that carries over. They're stepping into a whole new path, if you will. So I don't have to go too much in detail of what they did, because what previously happened isn't really going to affect what we're looking at now. But if you will remember, when they were leaving, they were going to head west, which is the direction they believe Seraph and his group were still headed, because that's still their ultimate goal, is to try to find Seraph, Deacon, and Mugen, and help them find Dina, which they've already done, but Artis and them don't know that yet. Hopefully find them and then help them get her back, and then get everybody back home is their ultimate goal. But Quintius also did let them know that he has been advised through the powers of the gods themselves that they are to head west, because there is something out there that they will be affected with, something that they have to deal with, something they have to see. He doesn't know exactly what or who or what, just that he has to go that way. And Quintius has kind of been their guide in this process, and they know through what Quintius has said is that very often he doesn't like just hear the gods speaking to him. He just has knowledge all of a sudden that he didn't have before, and knows that it was been granted to him from the gods themselves. He is a direct link to the pantheon, specifically Minara, goddess of light. So we're going to start with a little bit of reading, as we always do. So I like to start with a little reading, and we'll get right into it. So hopefully you enjoyed the episode, and I thank you for coming by. All right, let's see. Artis, Maeve, Petal, Ran, and Kip had been traveling for weeks. Continuing west, they had passed through several small towns and villages. They had spoken to countless people, yet no one had seen Seraph and his companions. They were beginning to fear that they'd completely lost his trail. Now, you remember that what started their whole, hey, we have to go find them, is that Deacon was leaving hidden magical messages that only Petal knew how to find. And they were following that for a while, but then ended up getting off course. So she hasn't seen any of those in a while. And if he has been still leaving them, it means that she's just not going in that path with which to see them. And I can tell you that right now, if we're looking at a map, both groups were heading west, right? So for you guys, that's this way. Both groups are heading west. They were along the shore, Artis's group, right? Because their ship just got sunk, unfortunately, in the last adventure, and now they're on land, but they're still near the shore. Where Seraph and his group were much further to the north. And at one point, they had considered going south, but their concern was, well, it would maybe be a faster way home if they could get a ship. They also knew the Oromanians were traveling by ship in that area and could also be looking for them. And there was concerns that they'd be caught by Oromon. So they have been staying north. They're going west, trying to sneak through these mountains to get to an elven kingdom, where Artis and her group are very, very far to the south. So Artis and them they're going a little bit northwest, getting a little bit further away from the shore. But Seraph and them are way away from it at this point. It would have been much, much longer travel. So their paths are running slightly parallel, but they are not headed towards a position, at least currently, where they would meet up unless something changes one of their trajectories. So just kind of giving you a layout. And at this point where they are right now, Seraph and his group are further west by a fair bit. They had quite a bit of head start, of course, and they've been making good time there. At least until the point that they reach the mountains, but we'll deal with that when we get back to Seraph's group. So, I will continue. Yet they continued slowly west, led by Quintius's direction that they were needed somewhere in that way. Quintius did not know where or by whom, but they trusted the light to guide them. For the past 3 days, they'd been traveling an old road, unkept and in poor repair. They'd not seen anyone else in that time. The few farmsteads they'd seen were long abandoned. Artis had spent quite a bit of time talking to Quintius, learning more of his powers and his past. Because remember, he's been around for, at this point, the estimate is tens of thousands of years, although there are time periods where he goes dormant or sleeps for long periods. And again, only Artis can see him and talk to him or hear him specifically. And he has also become with that knowledge and that experience and that age, he's become a very trusted advisor to her, who very often the others look to her for leadership as she is a princess and so on, just by natural. They very often will, kind of look to her for leadership. And Quintius isn't one who sees her that way. You know what I mean? He's a very neutral party. I mean, he's invested in them. He's not non-emotional. He has emotions and so on and so forth. But he's literally looking at it from an outside point of view. He tries to give her the advice based on the question she asks, using his own knowledge and experience. Let's see. Artis guarded the scepter carefully, swearing to never let it fall into the wrong hands again. Because you remember that was what the whole last adventure was. Petal had spent much of the time reading. No one knew what about, as she'd carefully avoided their questions, and she was careful to put her book away when anyone approached. Because you remember, Petal got a hold of a book a couple adventures back that she literally risked her life to get out of a castle that was on fire. She nearly died getting it and getting out of there with it. And to her, that book is overwhelmingly important, though she's not told anyone what it is, why it is, and you guys don't know either, because I haven't told you. But it is important, and yes, she still has it. Yes, she is currently reading it. Kip had kept them entertained with stories and song. At night, he never failed to bring them smiles or have them laughing so hard their sides hurt, all while Rand looked on in admiration. They traveled slowly and by foot. They were in no hurry, as they did not know their destination. They took their time, fearing that they might somehow accidentally end up missing some kind of sign or clue that Seraph may have passed by that area. So they don't have horses or anything like that. They're on foot, making their way down this road. All of them are in exceptionally good shape. You know what I mean? Well, they had access to horses and things as needed. Well, Artis and Maeve would have, and Petal probably as well. Rand would have had some experience with it. Kip, probably not, even though he may know the basics of riding a horse. Overall, they travel by foot. And again, they don't know exactly where they're going, and they're being very careful. Every so often, Petal's having to use magic to search to see if she can find any clues Deacon may have left behind. So they're not in a super rush, but they're steadily making a pace. Let's see. As the sun began to set on the third night, just as they began to discuss setting camp, a small town appeared on the horizon. The sky was beginning to get clouded and gray, foretelling of a coming storm. They decided to push on in hopes of a warm place to rest and protection from the impending rain. The old sign at the town's entrance said Sunny Hills, but the town itself was anything but sunny. Most of the buildings looked empty and abandoned, some even already starting to fall apart. Few people walked the streets, and those who did moved quickly away at the very sight of them. Entering the town and making their way deeper and down the street, they saw a sign for an inn named the Copper Helm, and made their way inside. So the town itself, Sunny Hills, if you will, is definitely, they could tell by the building, it's been there for a while. It's pre-merge. So you'll remember the merge is really what created this whole world and sucked pieces from different planets all over existence to create one new massive world. So pre-merge and post-merge is very kind of BC, you know what I mean? When we talk about time, 2000 BC kind of thing. So very often PM or pre-merge is what they talk about. This was here before that, which many things are. And then there's many cities and towns and things that have popped up since the merge, as it's been needed to do so. This city is definitely pre-merge, and they could tell that just by the age of the buildings and such. So building-wise themselves, they can probably see a few shops. There's a blacksmith, always. Most towns have at least one. Somebody's got to make nails, if nothing else, right? I mean, not all blacksmiths make weapons. That is a common mistake in D&D, I find. It's like every blacksmith has a bunch of swords they made, man. Most blacksmiths made horseshoes and nails and things of that nature, Not to say they couldn't make a sword, but unless they're a weaponsmith, they're not making anything of any real serious quality. You need to find a weaponsmith or armor smith to get that type of equipment. That's not to say they can't make knives, You know what I mean? Getting a nice, good, sharp knife, a hunting knife, they're going to be able to make that. They could probably make very basic swords. In times of battle, times of war, a lot of times they pull all the blacksmiths from the countryside in and have them start making weapons, usually being overseen by an actual weaponsmith. But a lot of those times, the swords and stuff they're making are sturdy and good enough to be given to the common soldier to basically go out there and try to kill or be killed. But for real quality or anything of real skill, decorativeness, or magical ability especially, you're going to have to find a very specifically trained and professional weaponsmith. There's always a blacksmith. Hi, Buffy. My kitty's here. Hello. It's hot in the house today. My AC doesn't work, so it's been toasty in here for us this year. So they find this inn. The inn itself, they can tell, is in better repair than many of the other buildings, and not all the buildings. There's probably about 30, 40 buildings total. Oh my goodness. 30 or 40 buildings total, which majority are going to be homes, several shops, and businesses and things like that. Give me one quick second real quick to grab some treats for the kitty. One moment. If I don't grab her some treats, she's going to be sitting here poking at my arm for the next hour. There you go, Squirty, your treats. So they make their way inside this building. There's lights on inside. There's smoke coming out of the chimney. They can tell it's still an open and running business. Entering inside, they can see that the inn itself is 2 stories. Fairly decent sized. They can estimate just by the size of it. Once they get inside, see how big the tavern area is, if you will. They can estimate the kitchen size. They can say this place probably has between 5 and 10 rooms, which is a decent size for a village this small. Very likely at some point, probably pre-merge, maybe this road was more traveled and they saw more business. But clearly not so now. There's a smattering of people around, a couple sitting at the bar tables, just a fireplace with a fire roaring, that kind of thing. The place smells fairly good, faint of a hickory smoke, and smell of some type of meat that's been cooking as well. And no one here looks like they're starving, you know what I mean? So clearly that the people are surviving okay, food, water, things of that nature. Of course, once this group walks inside, the whole place falls quiet, right? And everyone that they see is human inside. So in a town that's primarily human, or all human is what they've seen so far, Artist walks in with Petal, a Kender, who looks like a child elf very often, until you get close enough and see they look more aged in the face. Ran and Kip, half-elven, look all right. But once Maeve steps into the room, this 7, 8 foot minotaur in all plate mail, very well taken care of, shiny paladin plate mail, right? That silver and gold kind of thing. She is imposing to see. And, very often, in these situations, depending on what they're looking at, one of 2 things happens. Either Ran enters first to feel out the room if they're, if they think everything's okay, everything's fine, Ran will step in first. If there's concerns that there may be trouble, Maeve will set the tone by going in first. In this situation, Ran steps in first, followed by Artis, Petal, Kip, and Maeve is last to enter. So everything went quiet just when everybody else stepped in, his visitors, right? But Maeve steps in, and literally there's looks of shock on people's face, like, what the hell? Probably don't see, or have ever seen, maybe even a Minotaur come through here. Though common enough that they're very well aware of what she is. They're only in there a moment before a portly balding man comes up to them. He's got an apron on, and very quickly and clearly they can tell this is the proprietor of the inn. It looks like he's running the place alone. Not that hard. There's not that many people in here. But they don't see anyone that looks like a barmaid or help of any kind. But he quickly comes over and genuinely, pleasantly welcomes them in. It doesn't seem fake or doesn't seem pushed. He's like, hey, excellent. Visitors, welcome. Even with Maeve. Doesn't turn blind eye. Hey, excellent. Happy to see you. Introduces himself as a man named Remus, and he is, in fact, the owner of this inn/tavern. comments right off the bat. Oh, this is exciting, to be honest with you. We very rarely get visitors anymore. Please come in. Won't you come in and have a seat? And starts ushering them to, inward and close the door because that, like I said, it's starting to storm. Wind is blowing. Rain is starting to come outside. You make sure the door's closed behind them. Make fire's roaring. It's a warm place inside. And he kind of pushed me. He said, what can we do for you? What brings you to, what can I help you with? And artist is like, well, we're looking for a place to spend the evening and maybe a hot meal if you have one. And he's like, yes, excellent. I actually have several pheasants and some pork cooking right now, actually. We had a good hunt today. So, yes, I've got plenty of food. And we have rooms. Yeah, definitely. In fact, all of my rooms are currently empty. So I can definitely get you how many rooms would you like, that kind of thing. And as normal, they get one room for the girls and one room for the guys. For protection purposes, whenever possible, Maeve likes to make sure she's in the same room as Artis and Petal because she really sees herself as their protector. Which Rand does too, but, for privacy reasons, the girls in one, the guys in the other. Plus, of course, Kip and Rand are a couple, and they like to have their privacy as well. So, he's like, yes, actually, once that's settled, yes, please have a seat. He leads them to a table that's pretty close to the fireplace, where it's nice and warm and comfortable, and has them take a seat. Kind of says, would you like meats, cheeses, so on and so forth. And he says, yes, I'll get food, wine, whatever. And he goes, takes the order, and then brings it back. While he bustles off to get them something to eat, companions just, kind of casually looking around the room. People are kind of whispering to each other, but there's not a lot of open conversation, and most people are still very, casually trying to sneak and stare at them without looking obvious, which only makes them look more obvious, right? If you've ever tried to not look obvious, usually you do a worse job of it. But people are definitely looking at him, and there's some comments and such, but nothing quite loud enough that they can hear. Maeve uses the opportunity to silently use one of her own abilities, which is the ability to detect evil in a 15-foot radius, which covers a large selection of this, at least this front room in the bar. It's not a huge place, but it's big enough they can get most of it. So using that ability, she does not detect anyone that is just straight up evil or has evil intent. Just from looking at them, people look nervous and potentially scared of them, but no one gives off anything that would trigger her ability to detect just straight up evil. And again, like anything else, things that are exceptionally powerful may have the ability to cloak themselves, or mages may have some spells to cloak themselves from an ability of that nature. But no one in here really appears to be someone of that nature. Everybody looks pretty common. So, of course, Remus eventually returns and provides them food and so on and so forth. They start eating and drinking, and Remus gives them a chance to get started eating and such, bustles around, fills people's drinks, makes sure everybody has what they need at the different tables before making his way back to the companions' table. Sorry, I'm probably going to drink a lot this episode. Like I said, it's hot in here. So, Remus comes on over, and just kind of strikes up a conversation. Which direction you coming from? And they're like, oh, we came from east. We're headed west. What brings you this way? We're, give the standard line they use. I'm a traveling cleric. I'm on a, just basically, my mission is to walk around kind of thing. I've been charged with spreading the word of the gods and so on. And these are my companions, Paladin, who is also of the same church as myself, and our traveling companions, introduces them. Now, this revelation is clearly heard by everyone in the place, and everyone gets real quiet again. Remus, on the other hand, gets quite a big smile on his face and says, even better, he's like, I thought I recognized the symbol around your neck. And let me say, it is very, very nice to see you. It's been a long time since we've seen any followers of the old gods pass through this way. Now, upon saying that, an older man at the bar kind of gives him a, hey, shut your mouth, kind of, shut up kind of thing to Remus. Kind of, the first thing anyone's actually said towards their direction, other than Remus specifically. And Remus literally turns to the guy and tells him to piss off. Piss off! Drink your drink and keep your nose to yourself. He goes, I will not be told what I can and cannot say in my own home. Mind yourself there. Don't worry about what other people are saying. Gives this guy a little bit of a sermon there. He turns back and he apologizes to the companions. Artis, of course, smiles and thanks him for his courtesy. But says, if I may ask, I'm confused by the statement that you said there. You refer to the old gods. It's the first time they've ever heard of the gods referred to as the old gods. It's not something they've come across before. Remus nods knowingly. He says, "Oh, yeah, understandable." He goes, I am quite familiar with Minara, goddess of light, and your own Lord Zorn, because Zorn, the god of truth, is who Artis is a follower of specifically. Although they're still followers of the light. Zorn is child of Minara. So, I mean, there's that kind of thing going on. Still a follower of the light. He goes, I am quite familiar with it, though I must be honest, very few in these lands remember the names of the old gods, let alone worship them still. But my parents were not that way and still honored the old gods, and they're always welcome here in this establishment. Artis presses a little bit more and says, have you no clerics or healers here in your town? The clerics don't normally come through. And Remus tells them that on his world, which he gives a generic name that's not important right now, says, on our world, before the worlds collided to create this new abomination, the last cleric had died well over 100 years ago. It has been a long time since anyone truly claiming to be a cleric of the old gods had been seen walking the lands. Sure, there were the occasional folks who still worshipped and claimed to be followers, and some who were just charlatans altogether. But none of them had any real powers or skills that would legitimately show them to be chosen of the gods as their word. So he says, so again, you're in this land, even since this merging of worlds, there's heard talk that there's clerics now in the world and such again, but nothing's really come through here, although very few travelers do we get. As I'm sure you can see, our town is nearly empty at this point, and most people have moved away over the years, seeking more profitable or better places to live. Sure, there's food to hunt, we have water, we have ways to survive for sure, but no one's getting rich here. This road used to be a road that was traveled back before the merge, but now not so much. There's really nothing in either direction in a short period that people would need to trade. So those of us here are just trying to scratch out a living, the best that we possibly can. And over time, especially the younger folks being born and such into this new world, have moved off in search of greener pastures. Let's see. So again, he goes around, he takes a moment, excuses himself to go around and check on everyone else. He's a good host, make sure that everyone's had their drinks and their meals and such, and everybody's topped off their beverages. Then he comes back and they make arrangements for the rooms, and they pay for the rooms for the night as well as the food and drink. And then Remus asks Artis, he goes, if it's not too much, my lady, if I may ask, a boon, a favor, if I could. May I sit with you for a moment and ask you to pray with me? The opportunity to have a situation like this, someone claiming to be a true cleric of the gods, is not something I've had since in my entire life, and I just don't think I'd like to pass up the opportunity without at least asking. And Artis is like, I'd be delighted to. Of course, anyone is welcome to, although no one else stands up or moves to join them. Remus grabs a chair and pulls it over and sits down, and all the companions join hands and such, and Artis specifically takes Remus' hands, and she takes a moment or two to, pray to the gods, blessings for him and his people, for the city, bless this business, and, protect them within the light, and may they always see and hear the truth in all they do. It's one of those standard prayers you get from Zorn. Remus, at the end of it, is just all smiles. You can tell he's genuinely delighted that what he's seeing could potentially be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The man's probably in his mid-50s at this point. And the common man in a world such as this doesn't always live too long. You know what I mean? Not everybody hits 70 and 80 in a world like this. 50 is considered pretty old, unless you're in a situation of wealth or a healer, a cleric, mage, something that has the ability to prolong life a little bit better. So as he's sitting there and friends are kind of finishing up their meal, Remus kind of leans in a little bit and says something to Artis. And he warns her that her and her friends should not continue traveling west. I know that your goal is to go out and spread the word of the gods, and that's totally noble and awesome. But perhaps, maybe for your own self-care and preservation, it would be wise for you to go back to the east, or maybe even head north to some of the kingdoms and cities far, far to the north. He's heard there are some well over a month's travel north, but there are populated lands that direction that might be more beneficial of her her gifts, if you will. And Artis, straight up asks why. I mean, I appreciate concerns, but what is there to the west that we should be concerned with? I got mosquitoes in my house. I'm sorry. You hear a smack every so while. It's me trying to kill this mosquito that's bit me twice today. It's driving me crazy. Remus, Artis and Maeve are like, well, why not? Why shouldn't we head west? I appreciate the warning, sure, but is there a particular reason why? And for the first time, Remus looks a little nervous, even glancing around the room a little bit, and leads in, and his voice is a bit more hushed. And he says that the lands that they're entering now, of which really this town is on the border and forgotten by most everyone in every direction. The lands that they're entering, as he mentioned, have not had clerics for well over 100 years. And most people have moved on from belief of what they call the old gods. In fact, many of the people in this area have anger or even hatred towards the old gods, believing that they and their followers abandoned them. There were hard times that the people went through in this past 100 years, and without any form of cleric or sign from the gods to assist, the people themselves felt very abandoned. And Remus says, in that vacuum, in that space where no clerics or clergy existed, new gods began to appear. Now this, of course, really catches the group's attention. They're like, new gods? These are knowledgeable people, right? Serenity, the entire southern kingdoms, their parents traveled the world, saved the world, all this stuff. And at no time has anyone anywhere referenced new gods. It's the first they've ever heard of anyone claiming to be a new god. Not that Remus is, but he's saying that. And he says, in that vacuum, the people have embraced new gods. Gods that offer power and safety, though he fears sometimes for cost that is far too much. So they're being offered power and safety and protection, but the cost is sometimes greater than what they're receiving. He says, you will not find welcome in these lands. In fact, the anger of some folks still, even to this day, is strong. And you and your friends could be in danger. Although, and he looks at Maeve, you do look like you could handle yourselves quite effectively. Still, you could be in danger in the wrong group, or in the wrong setting. On top of that, you will find that the Lord of Night will not look favorably on you in his lands. Petal, of course, very intrigued. It's like, Lord of Night. Is that the king? Or is that the lord of the area? And Remus is like, no, to be honest, the lands that, to the west of here, which was from my homelands, there are multiple small towns and cities that grow. There's one large city in the center, Baleria. The kingdom, it was known as Baleria. It's a city, but there's no real king or lord that's ever overseen that. Most of the towns and cities have just kind of governed themselves peacefully for a very, very long time. No real king was needed. There was no real threat. Geographically, on their original world, they were very isolated, and there were not a lot of threats. It was very bountiful. People made a decent living, so people were able to live pretty peacefully without the need of some overall seen government. But since the merge, that has changed. The Lord of Night is the new god that most people worship or pray to in these lands to the west. The last 10 to 15 years have been a very hard and dark time for these people. And in that darkness, the children of the night, or as they refer to themselves, the followers of the Lord of the Night, arose to offer help and protection, saying that in this darkest time of darkness, it's the Lord of the Night that can lead people through that darkness. For who knows darkness better than the Lord of the Night? And those who worship and pray and give homage to the Lord of the Night would have his protection through this darkness till such time that, again, the light shines and the world becomes a better place, kind of thing. Though the overall improvement of the darkness passing has not yet come to pass, even though this has been going on for about 15 years. The head priest, the father of night, who is supposedly the word or the voice of the Lord of the Night, the head priest of the children of the night, if you will, which is what they're known as. Again, not like spooky. They're not walking around looking all gothed out or nothing like that. Black hair, black nail polish. I went through that phase. I'm just saying, but they did not. It's nothing like that. Were quite colorful and such. But they have built up and have, while not officially leaders or ruling the lands, they have been pretty much been given freedom to oversee. And the Lord of the Night, of course, has his rules and such that people must adhere to in order to properly worship and show their faith to the Lord of the Night. Both through tithing, of course, providing goods and services and things to those who are of the church. And they built a pretty comfortable living off of the people in this area. He goes, I'll be honest, he goes, I've only ever seen one of these priests myself one time. As I mentioned, we live on the very edge of the lands, and there's not much here anyone could want. It felt more like, when he arrived, more than proselytizing and sharing his word, he was more just to kind of size up whether we had anything worth their time or effort, if you would. He goes, and I can't be saying that I wasn't unhappy that it didn't appear that he was impressed, because he left, and that was about 8 years ago, and we haven't had anyone come back since. Although some people have left here and gone to the West looking for that type of guidance and leadership or faith, more people have headed to the East away. Because the Children of the Night do oversee the religious aspect of this area. All temples are devoted to that, and any type of public worship of old or other gods is prohibited, as they are seen as criminals who abandoned those in their care. So just by the fact that she is a cleric of one of these gods, or claims to be, right? Because how does he know? Remus hasn't seen her do nothing special yet. Definitely, she's traveling with some colorful people. That adds some weight to her story. But he's like, just walking around there openly wearing the holy symbol of Zorn is going to put you in danger. And I don't want to see that. You seem like super nice people. So while he's telling this and he's kind of finishing up explaining this stuff, Artis kind of looks up and looks past him, and standing right behind him is the image of Quintius that, of course, only she can see. And Quintius is standing right behind Remus, who's sitting in the chair kind of next to her. And as she looks up at him, he just looks at her. He's got a very serious look on his face. And he just looks at her and he nods. And she kind of gets it. She nods back like she understands. I see what you're saying. Okay. And she looks up and she's like, okay, I get it. And she turns to her friends and she goes, well, my friends, looks like we finally found why we're here. We finally know what has brought us to these lands and who or what may need us. I believe we found the answer to that question. Artis smiles and takes Remus's hands and says, fear not, brother. The light will guide us and the truth will protect us. I assure you, we are in no danger. Remus looks relieved, like, oh, okay, good. I've said what I could, but you guys seem pretty confident. Very, very cool. And so he looks at her, and she's got his hands, and he's holding her hands, and he looks at her, and he goes, so it's true, then? You really are a cleric? Aye, says Artis, and I carry with me the voice of truth. Now, that wording is important. It's the first time she's ever said anything quite like that. We bring the word of truth, but in this situation, her words were, and I carry with me the voice of truth. Hearing that, Maeve just stops. You know Maeve, she has that great, just like her father, she's eating the whole time. Like, really? Lord of the Night? You don't say. Children, scary stuff. Yeah, he's constantly eating. They are known for their appetite. But hearing this, she stops. And she puts the utensils down. Because hearing the words, I carry with me the voice of truth, makes her remember something from the past. Something very important. And just looking at Artis, she just barely whispers, so it begins. Maeve says, pushing away her plate. Like, I can't finish this now. Which is not something Maeve does. Those words that Artis just said, I carry with me, I carry the voice of truth. Maeve's like, wow, okay, I've been waiting for that. Now this can officially begin. We're ready to go, and pushes her plate away. So the next morning, the friends, they spend the night, they get sleep, get plenty of rest, no problems, everybody gets a good night's sleep. And the next morning, the friends wake up, make their way back down to the common room again. The next morning, the friends enjoyed a nice hearty breakfast. Remus was as friendly as the night before. He did not bring up his previous warnings, and they politely did not inquire further. There were quite a few more people in the inn this morning, and it was easy to see that they were there to watch the new visitors. People were nervous, but far too curious to not come and see the cleric and her companions. As they neared finishing their meal, a young woman seated alone at a table nearby rose and limped towards them. Kip casually pointed out her approach to Artis, who turned to meet her with a large smile. The young woman was about the same age as Artis, and was dressed in little more than rags. It was clear she was experiencing pain in her left foot or leg. She was limping, they could see that. Are you a real cleric? The young woman asked nervously, this being the first person other than Remus to openly speak to them. I am, replied Artis confidently with a smile. I am a follower and cleric of my Lord Zorn, God of Truth, and I am a servant of the light. The girl nodded, clearly awed and nervous. Can you help me? I hurt myself last month, fell down some stairs, and a piece of broken wood stabbed me in the leg. And I had old Aggie look at it, and she gave me some creams and stuff to put on there, but it still pains me something horrible, and it seems to be getting worse. Smiling, Artist says, My abilities to heal are minor, replied Artist. True healers are the clerics of Tavian, but I would be happy to take a look and try to help if I can. Kip stepped up and pulled his chair over so the young woman could be seated next to Artist. Several of the other people in the room arose and stepped a bit closer, clearly curious at the goings-on. The young woman pulled her dress up to about her knee, where Artist could see that there was a wound on her calf. It was deep and swollen, red and clearly infected, and actively still bleeding. Petal came over and kneeled down and took a look as well. Again, you got to remember, Petal has an even greater knowledge of probably creams and salves and healing things. Being a mage, she's got a little bit more in the herbalism side of things, even though Artist has the mage side. They work together, or the cleric side. Petal came over and looked as well. She gently pressed around the area, which made the young woman wince in pain. There's still something in there, said Petal. Artist got down and took a closer look, and agreeing with what Petal said, this piece of wood or something is still in there. It's causing it to not heal. I believe I can help you, said Artist to the young woman. But first we need to remove whatever is still in the wound, or else the problem will just come back. The young woman nodded, clearly afraid. The Artist took her hand. We will be as gentle as possible, I promise, she assured her. Petal stepped over to the fire and began heating up one of her knives. Remus appeared with his strongest wine, encouraging the woman to drink deeply. The young woman said, I don't have money to pay for that, and Remus is like, do not worry, go ahead, trust me, this is going to help with what they're about to do. Drink for a few minutes. So she's over there and everybody's getting ready, because they're going to go and do a little bit of surgical stuff. It's not all about pop a magic heal and you're fine. You know what I mean? If it's a wound, sometimes other steps have to be taken. If you use Cure Light Wound, at least this is how we've played D&D, the many years we've played it. Healing a wound, like, for example, if I have a stab wound and there's a piece of wood or a bullet in my arm, right? Cure Light Wounds doesn't make it pop out. It heals the wound over it, but there's still something in there. And that thing is a foreign object, and it can continue to do damage and just cause the issue to come back or even get worse than originally. You're healing the wound over. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're making it perfectly okay. Granted, there are some very strong healing spells that can have that effect. Heal, which is probably the strongest healing spell other than bringing someone back from the dead, can do that. But Clerics of Tavian, Artemis, one of the only clerics we've come across with the ability to even cast that spell. It's a very high-level healing spell that really only clerics of healing have access to. So she gets a little bit tipsy very quickly, drinking some liquor, and Petal gets one of her knives, because again, even though she's a hoopak wielding quarterstaff type person, she still carries several knives just like her mother does. That's her mother's side. Mother taught her to fight with knives and a hoopak. Father taught her to fight with a quarterstaff and several other weapons, including, if she really needed to, a sword. There was a mage, she shies away from that. It took a couple minutes for Petal to cut out the small piece of wood that was lodged deep in the wound. By then, though, the woman was clearly in tears. It was very painful. I believe that's all of it, Petal said finally. Artemis nodded and placed her hand on the girl's wound and began casting a spell of healing. She felt the warmth of her god's magic flow through her, closing the wound beneath her fingers. The spell ended and Artemis pulled away her hand. The young woman had stopped crying and stared at her leg in shock and amazement. People all around pushed forward to get a better look. On the girl's leg was a small bruise where the wound had once been open and bleeding only a moment before. The pain is completely gone, the young woman exclaimed. The crowd immediately erupted into conversations and whispers. Men removed their hats in respect and could be heard saying things like, "She actually did it," and "It's true," and "By the old gods be praised." Artis rose and the room fell silent. Every face in the crowd stared at her in awe and admiration. "The gods have not abandoned you," said Artis. "They have always been here. It is through faith in the light that we find our true way through the darkness. It is by embracing the word of truth that we banish it altogether." By the time the friends were ready to leave the town a few hours later, nearly every person that lived there had come by to see them. Everyone wanted to see Artis, to ask for a prayer or a blessing, or just to reach out, touch her hands, or touch her robe. Artis took it all in patiently. She constantly reminded them that she was just a tool, a vessel from which the gods' blessings were distributed. She wanted to make it clear that she was just the voice of the true gods, and it was they, not her, that deserved faith and devotion. They left the town of Sunny Hills as celebrities, continuing west. They hoped they'd find more towns just as inviting, yet Remus's warnings caused them worry. What could truly lie ahead? So this is the first time they've seen clerical magic actually happen in this area in the lifetimes of all the people that are there. Enough to literally bring out the faith. People like, wow, we can actually see this. We see that this is true. This is a healing ability. And mages can't heal, right? We've talked about that. There just aren't any real healing spells for mages. There's illusions and things of that nature, which possibly she could be doing. Illusions strong enough could make you think the pain is gone temporarily, at least while the illusion lasts. And you may not know how bad you're actually feeling at the time. But to everyone else, this appears genuine. She's genuinely a cleric. She didn't pull out bat wings and she didn't wiggle her hands all over the place. She literally put her hand on the girl's leg, her other hand on her holy symbol, and she prayed. And it worked. It wasn't the words of magic as much as it was a prayer to the gods, because that's kind of how cleric spells work. Okay. So, you got to imagine for someone like Artis and Maeve, whose, life goal is protecting people and fighting against evil and the darkness and bringing the word of truth, being able to stoke the faith of people and bring that faith back to the gods, old or new, regardless, the gods that they know to be true, is totally their life's work. This is exactly why they're out here. Outside of trying to help Seraph, but, had this whole Seraph adventure not happened, this is what they planned on doing with their lives, right? They weren't just going to sit in serenity for the rest of their lives. They were going to go out and try to make the world a better place before eventually probably having to come back and become a queen at some point. At least on Artis' side, and Maeve potentially stepping in to help with the family business, or maybe not, whatever Maeve wants to do. But for some point, they wanted to dedicate their lives to going out and spreading the word of their gods. So this is a perfect example of that happening, in the best possible way. They came to people with no faith, who some actually had anger and hatred towards the gods, and 180'd them. So that's pretty cool. But now they're heading more west, because if there are more people here that they can do that for, they definitely want to. Quintius has led them to believe that is why they're here. And then, of course, last but not least, if there is someone out there claiming to be a new god or followers of a new god, which is not true, because to their knowledge there are no new gods, then that means there's people out there who are lying, and as clerics and paladins of truth, they just can't have that. So they have clearly found something that they need to put their time into, and that is to the land of the West. I got a little bit more to go here. It was several days later, late in the middle of the night. It was Kip's turn on watch, and he sat quietly next to the fire. Small fire, mostly embers and stuff, small glow. He sat next to the fire, listening intently to the sounds of the night for any sign of danger. There was a gentle wind on this calm night, and his companions rested peacefully nearby. He almost missed it. So small and barely audible the sound. A human would have likely heard nothing. With his half-elven parentage, Kip's hearing was much, much better. With his training, he is a bard and a rogue, remember. With his years of training, his instincts recognized the threat immediately. "To arms," he yelled, rising and drawing his sword. "We are under attack." His friends were awake instantly, reaching for and grabbing their weapons and beginning to climb to their feet. Even with their haste, the threat was already among them before any of them even stood. The figure was there, among them, almost as if he'd magically appeared. It struck Kip with its fist so hard, Kip was knocked from his feet into the air, the wind completely knocked out of him, crashing to the ground a few feet away. Kip coughed, nursing what was likely a broken rib. You can only imagine that this is what it must feel like to be struck by an angry Maeve. So, tiny microscopic noise. Kip hears it, recognizes that's something out there in the darkness, yells a warning to his friends, pops up, draws his sword. As his friends are waking up again, suddenly the figure is there and just hits him real hard right in the chest, and he goes off his feet, flying backwards several feet, and he can tell that one of his ribs is cracked or broken from this. Of course, by this point, everyone else is on their feet. Ran has his weapon drawn. Maeve has her huge sword ready to go. Petal already beginning the words of a spell. Artist drawing her morning star as well. The figure, for in the glow of the light, it appeared to be humanoid. There's hardly any light here, and while they do have infravision, everyone except Ran. No, Artist doesn't either. Let me take that back. So Maeve has infravision, and Petal has some infravision. With the glow of the fire, there's enough light that it's hard to make out a lot. But it's clearly the size and shape of a human, male or female, not overly large, but just same size as potentially Ran or Kip. And while it appears to be human in size and shape, as they proceed to try to attack or defend themselves against it, they realize that it's moving much, much too quickly for a human to be able to do so. Maeve, of course, charging in as she normally would, draws her sword and swings. The thing very easily and quickly dodges, and then grabbing her, picks her off the ground and tosses her several feet away from the camp. Now, Maeve is not wearing her armor right now. She was sleeping. But Maeve is a minotaur. She is dense, not stupid, heavy. She is not a light person. To easily pick her up and toss her, again, shows great strength, much like the strike against Kip. Haha, got the mosquito. Sorry. Ran immediately, of course, steps in and begins attacking. Now, of the people still standing there, Artis, Petal, and Ran is the best swordsman. Ran's the best swordsman out of all of them. Maeve has power and her own abilities and the magic that comes with being a paladin. She's a powerhouse warrior. But for actual swordsman ability, fencing, if you will, the actual sword fighting, Ran is the best among them. That's all he's trained at, right? Well, Maeve had dedicated years of her lives to becoming a cleric, had no intention of wielding a sword. That came later. Ran spent his whole life training to fight barehanded and with blades, and multiple other weapons. And the dude is very good with it. And the added additional instructions from Kip's style of fighting have only made him deadlier, because it's taught him to step away from some of his instincts, the honorable combat, to try not to cause severe damage, but to try to take someone alive kind of thing. Kip has taught him that in times of great duress, when his friends, or more importantly his charge, his princess, is in danger, there are times you just can't hold back. So Ran comes in immediately. The figure draws no weapons. And yet, even though Ran is attacking with swords, swinging and flying, the thing is constantly dodging his attacks. Now, Ran's attacking enough that he's keeping the creature at bay. I say creature because they don't know what it is. It's human, obviously, but it's really strong. So it could be a golem, or they don't know yet at this point. But whatever it is not able to get an attack quite in on him either, because of how quick he is. He's able to kind of keep the thing at bay, but that's about all he's getting done. He's not making contact at all. Now, it's about that time that Petal releases her spell, basic magic missile spell. Magic missile, of course, being one of the best and easiest spells for a mage to use, because it is guaranteed to hit. If you are creating a wizard as a character and you only get to pick one spell, take magic missile. Yes, it's what everybody else does. But if you play in a group that your experience is based on combat, which many people do, you get to share the experience for defeating. I've seen a lot of groups where you have to get a hit on a creature to get part of that experience, right? That's how, not everybody, but a lot of groups I've seen do that. Fighters will end up going way faster because they're doing all the physical combat. Magic Missile is going to get you a hit on something. You're going to get some experience in every fight, even if you only get to shoot one. It's a guaranteed hit. Get you some experience, you can get some better spells. But some people take Burning Hands, which is okay too, but a lot less versatile. Take Magic Missile. Trust me, it's going to help you out. It's going to seem that's what everybody does. It's boring. If you have a DM that only lets you have one spell, take Magic Missile. I don't do that. I give them more than one spell, so they're not stuck always taking Magic Missile, and I don't do experience purely by combat, so they're not stuck trying to get a hit in just so they can help. But many groups do. So if you're in one of those groups, get you some Magic Missile. But Petal fires off her Magic Missile, because again, this thing's fast and it's quick, but she can see it. And if she can see it, her Magic Missile's going to hit it. That's just a fact. Unless it has some type of protection against Magic Missiles, which is still going to hit it, it just, in that situation, won't affect it. Its Magic Missile does fire out, and she fires more than a single Magic Missile. At this point, she fires two. For those of you who know Magic Missile work, will give you a hint to what level she is. But she fires two Magic Missiles from her fingers, which, of course, successfully strike the figure. It catches it by surprise momentarily, and Ran successfully gets a cut. Not on himself, but on the figure. Manages to cut it on the side. Now, he's fighting basically in a silhouette at this point, because the only light is the small glow of the fire behind them, and Ran has no infravision. So he is literally fighting against a shadow. But he knows he made contact. He can feel that happened. Artis at this point has stepped in as well and swings her Morning Star to try to strike the figure, now that Ran and Petal kind of got its attention. But the figure dodges backwards quickly out of reach of her swing, and then kicks her hard. Literally just flings out with his foot, kicks her, and she goes falling back, kind of landing on her butt. Because, again, with the strength of the kick, it's like getting kicked by a horse. Knocks the wind out of her, and she falls back and hits the ground. Now, Artis has taken a hit, and Ran can't have that. So Ran immediately doubles his effort. He's in there hard, coming out with, hey there, Mr. Terry. Ran's in there hard. Now, just his, trying to take this threat down before it can do any more damage to his friends, especially Artis. Because Ran loves Kip. And ends of the earth for Kip. But Ran knows his job is to protect Artis. That's what he's sworn his life to. And Kip has no illusions. If it's a situation where Ran can save Kip or can save Artis, Ran is going to save Artis. Kip knows this. They are quite clear. They've had this conversation. There is no illusion there. And Ran has said to Kip, if it's save me or save Artis, you let me die, man. You save Artis. Artists is why we're here. It's what I've devoted my life to. You save me and let her die, I'll never forgive you. Artists is our priority in any one of these situations. I'm going to do everything I can to save you too, don't get me wrong. But if it's one or the other, artist has to be what we do. I've sworn to that, and if you're with me, you're swearing to that as well, to which Kip has. So Rand is like just in there now, super, and the thing is just, again, dodging the attacks occasionally, even smacking the blade away with its hand, and not appearing to take any damage from that. It's at this moment that Artis hears a voice in her mind, the voice of Quintius, who tells her a command word, a word of magic. She is aware of this. They have talked now about some of the abilities and such that he has. And he's saying a command word, which is basically like, you need to use this ability now. Do this. And she trusts Quintius completely. If Quintius is giving this advice, it's because he genuinely thinks this is their best chance. So even though she's still kind of coughing from the kick in the stomach, reaching down into her belt, where Quintius always is, even when she's sleeping, slides Quintius into her hand, raises it, and calls out the word of magic, one that she's used before. Bright light glows from Quintius, literally a ball of light in all directions, making it as bright as day, flows from the scepter in his hand. Everyone, including the figure, is engulfed in this light, and for many of them, it'll take a moment for their eyes to adjust, especially those using infravision. But now, everybody can see everything, so they're not fighting with that crutch anymore. The figure, which at first appeared to be human, can now be seen to be of human, though its skin is incredibly pale. Its fingernails are long, like claws, even though it's dressed well. And the thing, raising its hand against the light, snarling at what is either discomfort or pain, they can see that the thing has fangs. Its body begins to smoke slightly in the light. Now, this is not sunlight, but it's as close as you can get to magical sunlight. Maeve and Kip, at this point, have also regained themselves and are charging in, and together with Ran, begin attacking the figure in earnest. Though in pain, the creature is still incredibly fast and strong, dodging the majority of their attacks and occasionally even getting a smack or a kick in itself. But it is occasionally getting hit, and lines are cutting through its clothes, and they can see the creature is in not bleeding per se, but being injured by these attacks. Suddenly, the creature does something unexpected. With a burst of speed, it charges forward, nearly knocking Ran over completely, but definitely pushing him out of the way, and is charging directly at Artis. Now, this thing is fast. The pushing of Ran took a second to get him out of the way, but he charged forward, push, and then is charging at Artis, who at this point is maybe 5-6 feet away, a very small period of time for something moving this quickly. But before he can reach her, a small figure appears between them. With a loud scream, Petal attacks. The wooden stake in her hand pierces the creature's chest and goes directly into its heart. The creature screams out in anger and pain and falls backwards to the ground. It lay there in, for all intents and purposes, pain, though unable to move, almost like it's pinned or being held down. Petal steps towards it and looks, and the friends come over as well, and they're kind of looking down at it, and without hesitation, very calmly, Petal looks to Maeve and says, "You have to take its head." Maeve doesn't hesitate. Raising her huge two-handed cleaver sword, which the more you think about it, it looks very much like a Final Fantasy sword in her hands, really. Brings it down, cleanly cleaving the head from the creature's body, causing it to shiver and jerk around just a little bit. Everyone stands there catching their breath. Kip having the hardest time with that because he's still got that busted rib, maybe too. Petal's not done, though, and quickly directs them, you must pick up the bodies and put it in the fire. The body. Put it in the fire. You have to burn it. All of it. But be careful to keep the head away from the neck. Understanding that what Petal's saying is working, they're not messing with it. Maeve reaches down and picks up the creature's body, careful not to remove the stake, which Petal directs her to do. Carries it over and puts it on the fire. Kip begins trying to stoke the fire and getting it burning faster, which, surprisingly, the body erupts into flame almost immediately upon hitting the heat. Kip brings over the head and sets it beside it, careful to avoid the neck area, to which it bursts into flame as well. While the creature itself makes no sound, it's almost like there's the most silent of scream, almost like air escaping in the air as the flames continue to roast it. Kip looks at Petal, immersing his hand. At this point, Artis is over there casting a healing spell on him, trying to help heal him up. And Kip looks at Petal and says, how did you know? How did you know what to do like that? Because they didn't know what there was all silhouettes. I mean, they didn't know what they were messing with at that point. Petal looks at him calmly, although she seems slightly irritated. Not at them, but the situation. And Petal looks at him and says, I've trained for years to be a mage, to be able to control the wild magic that flows through me, and always has. And while I've trained hard for that, I've spent my entire life being trained to be a hunter. My mother and father are two of the greatest in the world, and from the moment I could walk, I was being taught how to kill the undead. I am never unprepared to fight the dead. And walking away, she goes over and pulls another wooden stake from her backpack and tucks it into her belt. Where the way it tucks in, it just looks like a wooden stick. They don't see the pointed end. They never really thought much about that. It's just sitting in there with her knives, her weapons, her books, her tubes of spell components, her pouches. She's got all sorts of stuff. She's a Kender. She's got pouches all over. It's just how Kenders work. But for the first time, they realize she's not just a mage. She's a wild mage who has spent 16, 17 years being trained by two of the best on how to fight the undead. And as soon as she could see what that was, she knew what needed to be done. The friends stood together watching the vampire's body burn until it was nothing but ashes. At Petal's instruction, Ran and Kip gathered as much of the ash as possible, so it could be spread far as they traveled along. Maeve stood alone with Artis. Think this was a one-off? Asked Maeve. An unlucky coincidence? Artis shook her head. I don't think I believe in coincidences anymore, she replied. I fear this cult, this children of the night, are much more than we thought. And if that is true, then we may be needed more than we ever believed. They stood together until the sun came up over the distant hills, taking solace and comfort in the light. And that's where we are today. Ran a little longer than normal today, but I'm pretty happy with that. So, whether or not this apparent attack has anything to do with what they've learned of this land, they don't know. But Artis not really feeling like this is a coincidence. Now, is this the only one? Are there more? Is there different things here as well? Is this cult really enslaved? I mean, there's so many different ways this could go, right? But all they know is that if this is here, and it was clearly a threat to not just them, but any normal person living in the area, what else could be there that they're needed to fight, to take down, to defeat, to help these people? Because that's their calling, to help and protect people and to help serve the light. And a vampire is about as close as you can get to a servant of darkness. So, 2 weeks from now, we'll be back here again with some more Merged Worlds. I hope that you will come back and join us. We'll be continuing with this story. So we'll be moving on with the artist section for a little while before we step back to Serenity and or Seraph. Though I can promise we're not going to be going as long without seeing the others. For a little while we're going to see bits and pieces of all three because some things are moving together that may be connected. But right now, for at least the next couple episodes, we're definitely hanging out with artists Maeve, Ran, Petal, and Kip, and their issues with the Children of Darkness. Now, just as an aside, all the things that help the animals get to live and thrive and find a forever home. Next Tuesday, and I'm going to edit this part out of the audio podcast because by then people won't hear it, but for those of you who might be watching, next Tuesday afternoon, I'm going to be doing a 12-hour charity stream. I normally only stream every other Tuesday on YouTube, but next week on my off Mergeworlds week, running from 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be playing a bunch of different games. We're going to be doing stuff with the community and the audience, maybe jump out some GTA. We're going to do some Jackbox and some other stuff, play some games, and try to raise some money for this wonderful charity. We do it every summer, and I'm excited to get to participate again this year. But that is going to do me for this week. Again, thank you all for coming and hanging out and letting me tell my story. I'll be back here again in 2 more weeks for a little bit more Merge Worlds. These podcasts are also available as audio podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. If you have an iTunes or Spotify, man, it would be awesome if you wouldn't mind swinging over there and giving the podcast a follow. And if you have the time, maybe give it the 5 stars and maybe leave a review and the likes and the things like that, just so that their algorithm will see people enjoy it and help put it in front of more people. Because I love to share my story. But thank you all very much for coming. I'm going to call that a day. I hope you all have a wonderful week or 2. And hopefully I'll see you back here again in 2 more weeks for a little bit more Merge Worlds. All right? You all have yourselves a wonderful day.